spinning. It hasn't. Florida's new Surgeon General says that the COVID-19 vaccine is nothing special, yet he can't stop checking the vaccine's Instagram account and asking friends if they've seen it lately.
Facebook is using its news feed to show people stories. Facebook is using its news feed to show positive stories about itself. Not surprising, since the only people who still use Facebook are people who work for Facebook.
A woman with amnesia has been found on an island in Croatia that is entirely inhabited by bears. While she doesn't remember anything about her life and can't explain how she got there, she's shown a proficiency for seeking out and stealing picnic baskets.
Picnic baskets. Hey, boo boo.
I love that joke more than I should. I really,
At 107 years old, 2 Japanese sisters have been certified by Guinness World Records as the world's oldest living identical twins. But they were hesitant to get their pictures taken, since most photographers just ask them to make out.
And finally, Beto O'Rourke, who nearly defeated Ted Cruz in 2018 and ran for president last year, will probably run for governor of Texas. You know what they say, third time's a charmed opportunity to show people that you speak Spanish. Well, if you look at the time on the wall, you will see that it is Biden time. Yes, at a special Biden time, a little bit later, a little midday Biden time. But welcome to everyone who's joining us live. And I appreciate, of course, all of your time. As always, I'm Christian Bladt, joined by fellow mirth maker Tamra Brown.
Hello there.
And making a triumphant return, the reunion of the Bavarian boys, the one, the only, Al Gragg. Al, thank you for coming back on.
What up? What up?
Yay.
My fellow Bavarian brother. That's an old school one you pulled out.
Yeah, I know. It's that's like 3 seasons ago of Better Call Saul. And
right. And of course, Tamra, my sister from another mother, just glad to be back on the show.
Yeah, no, we had what could have been a really awkward moment right before we started, because Tamra was in the waiting room so she could hear us, but she hadn't jumped in yet. So Al was talking about Tamra, and I'm like, oh, let's see where this goes. And you said very nice things about her. And I'm like, well, that's not fun. Al's too good of a guy. Well,
Christian, what do you think? What kind of negative things do you assume somebody might say, Christian?
Too funny for this show. That's the kind of slams that he probably would have had for you, and that's 100% accurate. Anybody that you know or you hear about, if you listen to any shows that take place in Manhattan, you know that they've got UN fever because no one can get anything done in probably in any of the 5 boroughs. But President Biden spoke to the United Nations yesterday, and I definitely had to look up the name of the Secretary General. I kind of lose tracks. It's kind of like Elizabeth Taylor wives or Taylor Swift boyfriends. To me, the Secretary General of the UN will always be Boutros Ghali, because that was the funniest name we ever had. But apparently it's a gentleman named Antonio Guterres. So now I know that. But did I know that before this morning? Yes, I definitely knew who that was, because I keep up on the news and I really pay a lot of attention. President Biden did speak to the United Nations. He had sort of like a challenge to China and Russia, but he really stressed that he doesn't want there to be a new Cold War. Tamra, this struck me as one of those like high school fights that don't really happen, where it's like, yeah, you're lucky my chick's here. I'm not going to try and embarrass myself in front of my girlfriend or whatever. Everybody's holding me back. Yeah, hold me back, China, because both China and Russia would be like, "What you got, Biden?" And he probably doesn't know the answer. Look, I'm not going to pretend that any of us have watched all these speeches, but did you read about or get any sense for what President Biden spoke about at the UN yesterday, Tamra?
Yeah, well, I know that, you said high school. It is the high school aspect of it in my mind is like, I feel like he was being the principal who's like, I'm not going to name any names. Somebody has been building coal-fired plants in the hallway, East Wing, when they said they weren't going to. I'm not going to name any names.
Not any names, yeah.
So that's, he was... a lot of international leaders have compared Biden to Trump because of the fact that he is still sort of maintaining this America first when it comes to policy. He's just not using Trump's combative language. He uses a lot more inclusive language when he speaks. But that's an example of how he didn't want to pointedly say China or Russia as Trump probably would have done, but at the same time he was still saying how autocratic governments are damaging the world economy and things like that, and just saying this, sort of making the same point that Trump would have, but only just in a much kinder, gentler manner.
Yeah, I think it's, look, I would say that the United States president is very often a snake oil salesman. Just sometimes they give you a big hug, or they tell you, like, I'm going to give you a 10% discount. How does that make you feel? So it's, you're packaging the same product. I mean, the inside is the same product. It's just the packaging is different. So it's like you have the same box of crap every year, but the wrapping paper is just prettier. It's like, oh, I bet you want us to help. I bet some of these third world countries that don't have any vaccines yet would like some. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to start giving them to kids. We're going to start giving ourselves 3 shots. And does your dog want one? Great. We'll just go ahead and we're going to give them to pets. Maybe one day we'll share some of them. You guys want any AstraZeneca? We got a couple of warehouses of those. We'll give you that. And honestly, the J&J, maybe we can spare a couple of those. But yeah, I think that I think in general, world leaders, were exhausted just at the prospect of Trump. And this is at least Biden, to their perspective, is from the, he's from the like instant politician kit, just add water.
Professional.
Yeah, Trump was a totally different thing, and don't worry, we're not going to just heap praise on Biden for the show. We have a very, very troubling policy to talk about later. But Al, as it relates to putting America forward at the United Nations, just in general, what President Biden's been talking about and what you're hearing out of the UN General Assembly, what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, right off the top, I have to ask you guys to excuse my new reading nose abridged glasses. I don't know if you guys can see these, but I got
these are nice.
The new nose prop on them, so I could see like below the little focal line. But
well, yeah, you look. They're nice. They're right from the fraternity from Revenge of the Nerds. They look marvelous. Yeah, lambda, and the Omega Moos. Yes, so it's great. But anyway, shifting back to the UN.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can really add to you guys' takes on it. Biden, obviously the different tone than Trump, trying to establish himself as a world leader. And while you said, we're obviously going to be critical of Biden, I have along those lines, I find nothing to be too critical on him about this, as far as reestablishing America's leadership, humanitarian, COVID, trade, relations with Russia and China. I don't know what other different tack he can take. And also, besides this kind of like pie in the sky thing, kind of soft pedaling like Tamra and you guys alluded to. What other method could he take, I guess, which might not stall, relations. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that obviously came up, the Secretary General, who, as I established, I've known for a very long time, that it's Antonio Gutierrez. That is something I think we all knew. That he warned specifically sort of about this very dangerous moment right now, because we have this combination of COVID with the ongoing threat of climate change. And obviously, climate change has not been, no pun intended, has not been a hot button issue in America for the last few years, but it's something that you at least hear the administration talk about. But I wanted to ask you first, Al, sort of this idea, when you look at it globally, just sort of the real threat. And, it's almost like something science fiction, like a plague and the earth getting hotter. This is something that, you felt like 40 years ago. You're like, well, that's really depressing, but obviously that would never happen. And then you're like, oh, wait, didn't I see a movie like this where there was an outbreak and and then the earth is like hurtling into the sun. I don't know. This is all crazy, but sort of the real world kind of, again, globally, just these serious threats. And, what can we possibly do to address either of them, much less both, Al?
Yeah. This trifecta or a perfect storm we're facing, on all fronts, climate change, global, the impacts on the economy. Obviously, it's in spite of, I guess, like the hopeful talk, there's really no way to enforce any benchmarks or anything tangible, with the likes of Russia and China. Unfortunately, we can talk about all these goals, and the UN secretary can talk about all these goals, but the UN is proven to be relatively, toothless. Not that the intention isn't there, and the US, unless there's anything with might behind it, nothing is really enforced. And I'm not in favor of putting might behind any of these things, but it's kind of, I don't know, I guess I don't see a solution out of it except just the US doing what they can do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that a lot of this stuff has to be self-policing. And Tamra, were you encouraged by the fact that the Chinese have said that they're not going to build any coal-powered plants abroad? So they're still going to build them in China, but they're not going to build them in other countries. So they're like, look, we're just going to do it here. We're not going to do it anywhere else. So that seems like a big step by the Chinese, right?
Oh, I'd say yes. Big step forward, 3 steps back. If the Paris Climate Accord if every country abided by what they said to do in the Paris Climate Accord, we could hit a carbon neutral, a global carbon neutral place in 5 years. But none of the countries are doing that. And the United States, if we really truly believe that, if we want to go forward with an American first approach, I feel like the best way to do that is to be a leader when it comes to, climate, a carbon footprint, like be an example of a country that is putting the globe before our own personal interests. And that means stop approving offshore drilling, stop oil contracts right now. I mean, the word crisis is not strong enough. In 5 years, it is going to be irreversible. The increase, the 3-degree global increase that is going to happen. That is going to make a large portion of Africa completely uninhabitable. Like, people will die. The access to water will be unavailable to hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, this is just, I feel like I'm bringing down the podcast, but it's just impossible to talk about climate change without, the reality of what is really happening. The word crisis is just not even accurate anymore. It is within our lifetime. We are going to
be there.
That it's unbelievable that we are still that Biden is still approving offshore drilling, that has not been, that we still are relying on coal for so much of our energy, and in China, still manufacturing coal plants, and it's just unbelievable the things that are still happening in the world when this stuff is right in front of our face. When every summer is getting hotter, when every year is getting drier, this is right in front of our face, and we are still honestly not acknowledging it. And it's just, if the United States is a leader, this is where we need to show our leadership, and it's not happening.
Yeah, look, I think that the American people will come around to this after there's maybe 10, maybe 20 more really bad hurricane seasons. I think that's when it'll start to sink in.
20 more?
Just 10 or 20. Yeah,
okay.
somewhere between 10 and 20. I think that's when they'll start to really understand, like, man, this climate has really changed. I wonder if anybody knows anything about this. But I don't know now. And obviously, climate change was not a particularly popular issue, as I said before, the last few years. Someone who's not particularly popular at the moment is President Biden, who's statistically as popular as former President Trump at the moment, which honestly, I was like, well, that guy's still pretty popular. So, they're like 48 and 52. And so that's like, right in the margin of error. And we'll talk about something in particular that should find I don't know. I feel like a lot of people need to find this to be something that is definitely very unpopular. And Al, I know this is one of the things you wanted to talk about. And I think most of us have seen images of this Border Patrol agent with, I don't know, I was going to say with what looks like a whip, but if that's not a whip, you tell me what that is. And they're basically
lanyards.
It's his backstage pass to Coachella. That's what that is. It is, and just really trying to, I don't know, whipping Haitian immigrants, and and just today you have this like barricade of state trooper SUVs along the border in Texas, where they're trying to keep the Haitian immigrants out. And, I guess the problem becomes that, President Biden said that he would send them home, and they've been, I guess, let loose in America, in sort of in kind of an unchecked way. This is the perception. Let's just tackle this topic head on, Al. Your thoughts when you heard about this, and I don't know how you can see that image of the Border Patrol agent on the horse with what sure looks like a whip and not go like, oh, this looks bad for the White House. The optics are not good.
How can they get any worse? And I want to hit several points in response to your question, but without getting too, what do they say, prejudicial, though it's probably already too late. Let me ask you guys, an average viewer, what comes to mind when you see an image of white, police type officers chasing down Black people with whips? What other image comes to your mind?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's slave trading, and then it's sort of like the perception that the people on the horseback don't feel like what they're hurting is actually people. It's almost like, it's like a scene out of a cowboy movie. I mean, that's really what it feels like, and it's like, yeah, those are people, and obviously policy can be something that you can debate, and who you allow in the country and the process in which they come here. But I don't know who can tell you that there's ever a situation where that's what you need to do to people, any kind of people, no matter who they are. Even, you can't even make the case. It's like, well, these are Taliban trying to sneak in the country. Okay, but you still don't whip them. I don't know. What do you think when you see this, Tamra?
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Exactly. I mean, the Border Patrol is the most corrupt arm of an already corrupt criminal justice system. So, I mean, that's you're taking something that's already extremely corrupt, extremely aggressive, extremely disregarding, human life, and then this is the more corrupt. The Border Patrol is the more corrupt arm of that. So it's just absolutely horrific that this is still America in 2021.
Yeah, and let me jump in here, guys.
Go ahead, please, Al.
Yeah. There's a couple other points I wanted to hit to, aside from the images, which I know you guys get, but this bothers me on a couple of levels. The hypocritical treatment of Haitian immigrants versus the other immigrants. And there are several things, the Biden administration tried to wheel out, it's for COVID safety and reasons, we're going to send you back, when they're for the opposite reasons. We maintain, to the extent we can, the other Hispanic refugees, and their conditions, don't get it wrong, they're not much better, with the kids in cages, but we take the exact opposite tact with them trying to actually start processing them. Number two, Biden's, you know what his justification was? A holdover legislation from the Trump administration called Title 42. I don't know if you guys remember this, but where you can literally, specifically, whoever you deem as a safety risk, i.e. for COVID, and as if Trump ever actually thought COVID was a risk, but whoever he could deem as a safety risk, you know, you could send them back to their countries and you didn't need to accept them as refugees. So again, like the hypocritical treatment to me is almost mind-blowing. And the fact that, you know, Biden calls himself, you know, a Democrat. The last thing I'm gonna get on is I don't know, I guess I just wish, while a lot of people are outraged about the images, you know, a lot of people aren't going to, like I said, the tangible hypocrisy, you know, of how they were treated. And, you know, all of a sudden now Biden's a Trumpist, you know, with Title 42, which actually a recent judge actually said was unconstitutional.
Sorry, I had myself on mute, and I was also trying to bring something up at the same time. So the moment where I needed to click back on my microphone was not the moment where I could have. But yeah, I think that it's I don't know. It's you know, you make a great point, Al, because there's this idea of well, you know, Trump started it, and you know, look, you could use you know, Obama used excuses like that as like, yeah, well, you know, this is obviously President Bush, you know, and I think that it doesn't really, that you're the one who's putting it into place, you know, so you're the one who really needs to, you know, I mean, it's like, what about, and I'm sharing the image now. This is why I was trying to get to it. And, you know, like, what about what you see here is like, you know, oh, so somebody else told you that this was okay. You know, somebody else put this in place. You can't stop this. You can't be like, oh, wait, this is really bad. And I mean, obviously the border crossing is dangerous in any scenario. And, you know, no matter where people are coming from, and it's a very real problem. And it's how you address it. And, just trying to blame the former guy is not the best way out of it. So that becomes the question: where do they go from here, Al? I'll ask you first.
And I definitely, Tamra, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead of you.
Please.
Before I forget, aside from what came back to, these agents were saying, you know, racist things, go back to your S-hole countries. I mean, these things, to me, they're astounding, but they're not astounding. The fact that, you know, they're still happening. But I don't know. And also, and when you look at the images too, they were very specific when we talk about these border agents and we talk about, you know, the usage of this racist language. I'm just a quick history lesson right here. Those border agents, you know, they were personifications of the roles of the overseer of the plantation, because the overseer was on horseback. And what a lot of people don't know is that the U.S. Police Department was based on a legacy and the institution of slave catching in the South, not just from you know, going town to town and, you know, and plantation owners collecting posses, and, you know, and if you catch a runaway slave, you got to send them back. But tons of cities in the North implemented these, like the LAPD, Parker Center. He specifically recruited policemen from the South. Daryl Gates, you know, who gave us, you know, this explosion of crack and Rodney King incident. He's the one who also chased specifically police officers from the South. So it just, I'm sorry to be beating a dead horse.
No, not absolutely not. And, you know, and I mean, it's the horses we're talking about aren't beaten at all. Yeah, Tamra, your thoughts of where to go from here, and, you know, how do you know, I mean, should the first thing that President Biden should have done this morning just be like, yeah, we can't be chasing people on horses. You know, I mean, it's a very specific branch, the Border Patrol, but you're the president, so you can stop that from happening.
Well, there's two things that need to happen. First of all, these Border Patrol officers are people who took a job because they knew that it allotted them authority. So what type of person is drawn to that type of position in the first place? Also, it requires no specific background, very little training. So this is going to draw a certain type of person to that job. So the whole top part of criminal justice reform is one side of this. The other side of this, which we've talked about on this show quite a bit, is that how people don't want to leave their homes. They're leaving because of crises that have been gone on in they're leaving because the place that they are from is in such disarray that they are going to make this dangerous journey to this knowing that they would be facing this type of persecution. Imagine what they must be trying to escape from in order to know that this is what's ahead of them. And a lot of for the Haitian refugees, a lot of these people haven't lived in Haiti for 10 years. They were displaced during the 2010 earthquake, and they've been living in Central America or Mexico, and they're trying to find a sustainable living. They're trying to find they're just trying to live, so in order to help with that, we need to offer humanitarian aid to Haiti, to Central America. We need to get to the root of why people are having to leave their home in the first place, and do what we can as a wealthy country in order to help stabilize very unstable countries, and that so those are two sides of the problem, which is and then also too, just the fact that like Al said, that we criticize Trump so much for his immigration policies, and Biden really, he has not done anything different other than, again, the language. He speaks in much more inclusive language, less hateful, less aggressive, but the policy in itself, we have stopped what's Jeff what was the Attorney General's name?
Foxworthy.
No, remember who instituted the policy of removing children from their parents at the border.
I wish I remembered. Well, you can look it up.
Anyway,
yeah.
Biden has, we've eliminated that policy of removing children from their parents, but aside from that, there has not been any improvement in American immigration policy, and it's tragic, and it's horrible, and it's one of the things that makes it so hard to be proud to be an American.
Yeah, I mean, images like, I'll just tie up that thought. Yeah, I mean, images like the ones that I shared, and much worse ones that are out there. It is a lot of like, wait, aren't we supposed to be the good guys? What were you going to say, Al?
Yeah, I was just saying to cap it off. Sorry, guys. The last point was that if you get past the Rio Grande, which these Haitian refugees they had succeeded in crossing the Rio Grande. Normally, you're supposed to go right to processing. This is a unique instance where they take you after actually passing the U.S. border, where they take you back and take you out of the country. Anyway, that's my last point.
No, it's fine. And, it's not directly tied into this, but sort of, you're talking about what some of the imagery that we're seeing invokes and what it makes us think of. And obviously that's the long history of slavery in this country and slave trading and such. And Al, I know every time you come on, you always want to sort of give us an update on the issue of reparations. And I'd like you to talk.
Jeff Sessions. That's what I was trying to think of.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why you know what? Some things you block out of your memory. And I think that bipartisan across both sides of the aisle, no matter who you voted for the last 8 years, a lot of people want to forget Jeff Sessions. So, it's I think maybe they used one of those little Men in Black lights on us, and we just forgot completely about him. But yes, it's like, oh, this is a Jeff Sessions policy. So clearly we want to stick with it. That's a great point from earlier, Tamra. So I did want you to talk a little bit about reparations, and why don't you start locally? I guess here in California, Governor Newsom signed a bill that refers directly to reparations, and then go from there and talk about the work that you're doing and the film you're working on.
Will do. Perfect alley-oop, Christian. Thanks. Yes, a lot of people don't know. A couple of months ago, Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 3121, which is a reparations bill made to compensate descendants of slaves, specifically in California. And before we get too deep in on the details, I just want to shout out a couple of the groups and that have been working to make this happen. You guys always heard me talk about, ADOS and FDA, groups who are very, who are very pro reparations. That's like right at the top of their agenda. But there's this new kind of heavyweight group on the scene called NAASD, and a really sharp guy named Chad Brown, who was kind of like influential in the policy of their reparations. Him and along with the NASDLA actually helped influence the legislation and work closely with its sponsor, Shirley Weber. And so I'll go ahead and read to you specifically what the bill says. Assembly Bill 3120, which is introduced by Shirley Weber, mandates that the state create task force to study and develop reparations for African Americans with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved. Now, it may seem subtle, but Christian knows, when I get on here all the time, the biggest problem with HR 40, even though this, like HR 40, is just studying it, the biggest hang up with HR 40, it doesn't even necessarily go to descendants of slaves. It's nebulous at best. I don't know if it's going to, people of color all over the world, my husband's friend's cousin, and there's all types of causes and inclusiveness, we should do for people around the world. And I'll back anybody else's cause for reparations, but they were scared to touch the actual language of reparations for specific descendants of persons of slavery. And at that point, because if you don't include that, not only would, the compensation, I'm sure, be triple and probably break the system, it doesn't go to the lineage and the descendants of the people who actually, I feel, are entitled to it and put in the work for free, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which is the case of any time there's any kind of, massive government payments, whether it be, COVID relief, whether it be, for recent victims of hurricanes, the money never goes to, not never, so much of the money doesn't go where it's supposed to. And a lot of that money doesn't even go anywhere. The state or whatever body just hangs on to it. And they're like, we're going to see what we need to do with it. And yeah, I think that's part of the problem, because you can't even get to a point where you agree like, well, these descendants of slaves should get this. Okay. So if you cross that hurdle, then how do you make sure that they actually get it? So, and I feel like that's a big part of what you're working on, and tell people about Occupy Black and, basically just in general, the work that you're doing day in, day out.
Thanks a lot, Christian. Tamra, we haven't talked about a while, so I haven't told you about my film, my new project, Occupy Black. And I think last time I told you guys about the grant we just got awarded by the Department of Cultural Affairs. And I'll actually... Thank you. Yeah, I'll actually stream the link. It's still showcasing, online virtual festival showcase. I believe it's at. I should have this pulled up already, but I'll have the link for you guys in a second. But
yeah, just let us know when you have it. That's fine.
Right. But more importantly, Occupy Black specifically is critically analyzing the Black protest movement, not just from the 1960s civil rights movement, but to where we are now, and to critically assess the evolution of the Black protest movement. We've discovered that there has been a large degree, for lack of a better word, gentrification that's occurred within the Black protest movement. And I mean gentrification as far as like when you see who controls the money, the corporate sponsors, that BLM, for example, who's done a great job putting Black Lives Matter, just the notion, on the map. But if you made a donation to BLM in the past, a lot of times it got processed through Act Blue, which is a DNC PAC, or processing of payments, and I don't necessarily want my donation to go to elect Biden and Hillary. And then from there, it goes to the Tides Foundation, which is another larger global corporation, very interested in global warming and GMOs and refugees, which are all fine things, but that's not, what we all thought the movement was supposed to benefit. And Occupy Black basically makes an analogy to and proposes the question, is the Black movement being occupied? Or, for lack of another word, infiltrated. If you think of occupying the same way the United States goes into another country like Afghanistan, we muscle our way in, not with brute force and financially. In this case, it's financial, but we muscle our way in. We start propping up our own leaders, our own people who are the gate watchers, our proxies who are answer to us, where before you know it, the people and the average citizens aren't being benefited. But you have this kind of the newest term I've heard is nonprofit industrial complex is the benefit, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, I don't think that I've heard that combination of terminology before, but I mean, it absolutely makes sense. So for people to keep tabs on the film and what you're working on, it's just as simple as occupyblack.com, right, Al?
Yeah, you can go to occupyblack.com. You can sign up for our mailing list. We love to hear from you guys. And also we're here to answer questions. And we're not, also for the record, we're not here to go in on any other aspects of the movement. That we study other, growing aspects of the movement, like the reparations movement, the so-called B1 or Black First Agenda movement. We study all these things critically, while at the same time balancing there's some great things done. Where can we go from here? And so I'll just close with that link I was telling you about, where we're streaming the first chapter of Occupy Black. It's on the Hoop Bus at culturela.org, and just go under Reimagine Songs for a Revolution, culturela.org/Reimagine Songs for the Revolution, and that's the name of the showcase for the grant.
Right. And, we'll tweet it out after the show on Twitter at Biden Time TV. So if people look there, we'll make sure we send it out. I'll coordinate with Al and make sure I get it right. I don't want to be sending any broken links. Before we run out of time, the one thing I did want to address is something that we surprisingly haven't really talked about here on the show. And for the simple reason that it's not a country that we think of a lot, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about what's going on in Australia at the moment. I have a friend who lives in Melbourne, as I'm told I need to say it. And, I think that the three of us will probably agree that here in the United States, we have not handled COVID as well as we could. I think here at late September, almost October, we're not where we thought we would be even really 3 months ago, much less 6 months ago. But whatever the right approach is, me personally, I would say it's not what they're doing in Australia. So my friend who lives there, I'll just leave it anonymous. He was telling me about, they still are under like the strictest of lockdowns. They can't go anywhere. They can't do anything. And there are, like we have demonstrations, we have anti-vaxxers, but, mostly it's just people out at the beach in Huntington Beach here in the Southern California area, people that are like, oh, our restaurant, encourages people to not be vaxxed. But I mean, these are fairly violent demonstrations that are happening because I think here in the US, you feel like people have kind of had enough. And you know what they've had enough with? Wait a minute. You mean you want me to wear a mask at a baseball game? But in Australia, there's a system in place where you'll be randomly texted and you have 15 minutes to prove that you're where you're supposed to be, which is basically in your house. And you need to show that you haven't gone anywhere. And you're able to go get groceries. But, if you're outside and you don't have a good reason for being there, I don't know that you get arrested, but there's at least a fine. There's definitely punishment involved. And, I think that it's important that you take it very seriously. But at the same time, you hear this and you're like, so wait, there's like no going outside and being in parks. I felt like science dictated that we're okay with the outside. We'd talk about inside another time. And Tamara, I don't know how familiar you are and how much you've heard about what's going on in Australia, but just sort of these broad strokes. I mean, I think that we have people here in the US who feel like what we're doing is crazy and they won't stand for the tyranny. But then you see what's going on in Australia, which is a reasonably rational place as it's seemed from afar. And I mean, I hear it and I'm just like, well, that's crazy that they think that, they're like hoping that's like, well, if you're fully vaxxed, you might be able to get together with 5 people before the end of the year. We might allow dancing again before the end of the year. It's like, okay, so it's a country that's run by the city council from Footloose that we're not allowed to dance. So when you hear these little things, Tamra, it's all anecdotal evidence, but I was speaking to a friend who lives there. It's very anecdotal. And I'm just like, well, I feel like we're leaps and bounds. We're doing a lot better because it's not like their cases are at like 2, they have a less instances than we do, but it's also like, yeah, but you're not allowed to go outside. So Tamara, what do you think when you hear sort of the big picture of what's going on in Australia?
Well, after what you said, I'm wondering if we're getting, an accurate picture because I have seen photos of the protests and the signs and everything like that. And then every news story is about how Melbourne police are clashing with protesters. So it's easy to think like, and actually most of these stories that I'm just Googling right now, they're saying they're protests against the vaccine mandates. So it's painting this picture of, these anti-vax people who are just like how we have in the United States, the people who are protesting mask mandates, people who are anti-vaxxers. I'm wondering if that's accurate for Australia because this could very well be a large portion of people who are in favor of vaccines, are in favor of safety precautions, but they just want a little bit more freedom. So I think I would like to see a little bit more.
I think the protests aren't on the large scale. It's just that's sort of like what's happening today. That is why I reference them. But in general, I mean, you can't go outside and protest because countries like Australia and Canada don't have the same laws for the same rights for assembly and speech that we have here in the United States, and people very easily forget those things. So you're not necessarily guaranteed the right to have a peaceable protest, especially when you're the specific area that you live in and your prime minister are saying like, well, you're not allowed to go outside. And, it's sort of, it's, I think that now it's much stricter than it ever was here in the United States. That seemed to be more by states individually and all that. But it's like, we were always allowed to go outside for a walk, we were always able to go to the supermarket, they just weren't open as long. And there were stricter distancing laws in place. And I think to me, the most troubling thing is that,
Is it only people who are not vaccinated? Because, on my
it's
trip,
everyone.
I was just on a trip to Portugal, and the woman that I was rooming with was from Melbourne, Australia. So she got to leave the country. She was vaccinated. So how? Are the protests say they're for they are vaccine mandates? So are people who are vaccinated granted more freedom to move about and travel?
So it's more that they will be, and yes, they seem to have laws for travel. I think that's from a place like Melbourne. I think other parts of Australia, it is a little bit stricter, but the big issue to me is that the people who are vaccinated are the ones who later this year will be allowed to go somewhere and dance. That's basically what it's saying is for the fully vaccinated. And look, we have, we're here in the US having stricter laws in place for, places like movie theaters. And, here in Los Angeles, it's what they call mega gatherings of like 10,000 people or more, for indoor sporting events, outdoor sporting events, anything, concerts, all that stuff, you need to be vaccinated or have a negative test. In some places, they're not even letting you do negative testing. It's turning into the just be vaccinated. But the single most troubling thing is checking in on your population to make sure that they haven't left essentially their home confinement. When you hear that, Al, what do you think about, keeping tabs on your citizenry of, hey, it's like your parents go out for a date night, and then they call this, in the old day of landlines, they call the phone to make sure that you answer, because you're there. And like, do I hear a party in the background? So like the prime minister is like, you better not be partying. No, we're totally not partying, and we're definitely not dancing. There's no way. Nobody's got the twister out. We're not doing anything crazy. But I mean, of all of this from the story, that all of it, you can make cases about trying to keep people safe, trying to prevent the spread, but it's like, you're not allowed outside for more than an hour a day. It's like, isn't that when you're like literally in prison? Like, you get 1 hour of time, 1 hour out in the yard, So what do you think, Al?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in total agreement. When and I had just found out about this. So when Tamra started articulating it, and you kind of fleshed it out a little more about these restrictions placed on being at home and the schedule of time where they actually check up on you, I was taken aback probably just as much as both of you. But it brings to mind a really funny anecdote as we talk about the legitimate push and pull between, legitimate wanting legitimate freedom and not having to be, nuisance by the government, because we all know if they're texting you or they're calling you, that's not all they're doing if they already have your information in the phone. So, but beyond that, this really funny anecdote. Did you guys hear about the story regarding COVID, regarding Nicki Minaj's cousin's best friend balls
in Trinidad? Yeah, the fact that so what was it, he was like engaged and he went out for his bachelor party, and what every indication is he got syphilis or gonorrhea, and he's like, oh well, clearly these enlarged testicles are from the vaccine. And it goes so far as the minister of health is like, this does not happen from the vaccine. These are very much consistent with someone that has a sexually transmitted disease, and
she totally outed her friend.
Well, that's really what it comes down to. Is like he's you can question the morality of trying to pull a fast one on your betrothed, your fiance. But usually if somebody lies about something that happened, stepping out on their spouse or spouse to be, you don't usually get platinum selling pop stars and government officials calling attention to the fact that you're lying. So that was a crazy story. And, boy, the media sure spent a lot of time on that story. And it's the same media that criticizes the internet for, you're all so focused on the terrible story of the girl who was found dead, suspected, the YouTube star, the van life, and it's like, oh my God, you only care about this white girl. It's like, well, media, you certainly can portray other missing people, other missing persons. So it's like the media is like, well, yeah, you're just as complicit of it. Don't tell us, and then they ran with the Nicki Minaj story because it's funny. Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's funny. It's not so funny for her cousin, Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Only because I was going to say one more little funny note from that. I was just going to say the anecdote to this: Nicki Minaj, love her music, great, but she's the last person I would ever take really financial advice, health advice. Like any other celeb. That's just, those aren't the people you take advice.
Yeah, you're like Tamra and I, and you make all your decisions based on what Cardi B says, and that's actually a lot smarter. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, that's a much more rational approach to take.
And the good thing is, though, she actually had a point, though. I felt it was kind of related to you guys talking about, the degree of power and privacy. She actually had a good point, though. I think that was buried, that, maybe, she's still studying it. She's probably going to get the vaccine. She was going to tour. But that point got buried, aside from her terrible delivery. But what really bothered me, too, is Joy Reid immediately jumped all over her. As a sister, how can you do that? And then, she replied to Joy, and then that was MSNBC. And then Don Lemon immediately jumped on her, from CNN. And while I disagree with how she handled it, that it kind of brings me back to that notion of the media's appointed gatekeepers. And you see it a lot of times. Oh, well, let's get this Black person to respond to this Black person, who's kind of out of pocket, which went even beyond like what we were arguing about to me. Just again, that like my opinion of propping up certain entertainers, media figures, and gatekeepers, hop on other people.
Tamra, there's been a lot said in the last couple minutes, most notably enlarged testicles. So there's a lot to choose from, and I'm going to let you bring this into harbor with whatever you want to focus on. I don't want to pigeonhole you.
Well, I was just looking up what Melbourne's lockdown restrictions are, just because I was curious, and it looks like they are what ours were at the height of lockdown when we had to be. There was a curfew. They have a 9 p.m. curfew, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And there's a list of places that they are allowed to go, but it's 10 kilometers from their home only. So they can leave their house. They can leave their house for 5 hours a day to go to work or exercise or lots of spa availabilities. There's so many it's like spas and saunas, and Melbourne clearly cares about the need for self-care. Apparently spas and saunas are actively available.
Yeah, look, down under there's a very strong treat yourself initiative
mentality.
It's essential businesses are open, including massage.
So maybe the police are just reminding these protesters that they can hold up these signs as long as they're in a sauna, as long as they're in a steam room. Please take your protest off the street and into the steam room, please.
How well manicured are your toenails, sir? Let's see if you're actually, using the services that you should be using.
I was only, partially listening to the Nicki Minaj stuff. I've of course heard the, story when that happened. But what I did hear was that, but the last news I had heard reported on it was that was it the CDC was inviting Nicki Minaj for a meeting, and they wanted to have like a formal meeting so that they can like present her with clear evidence and things like that, and just to give her a more accurate representation of vaccine, what the vaccine actually is. That was the last I heard about it. So I'm not sure if she agreed to the meeting or not, but that was at least offered.
I'll tell you what happened. Nikki went right to Twitter, and I'm invited to the White House by Biden. And then they even had the White House had to come back and kind of like walk it back. No, Nikki, we wanted to talk to you in private. This was so the whole thing was just funny and full of layers.
Well, it was only a matter of time until Nicki Minaj was in a Twitter feud with Biden. So I would love to see him
honestly,
clap back.
I'm surprised that it took 9 months. I thought it was going to take 9 hours. And, which world leader will she get into her next Twitter feud with? Tune in next week, and we will be sure to let you know. Al, as always, it's great to have you on the show. We appreciate you making the time, and we always look forward to hearing more about your work. And just remind everybody where they can keep in touch with you and find out more.
Thanks again, Christian. Thanks again, Tamra. You can find out about my project, my Occupy Black documentary, on OccupyBlack.com.
And Tamra, where can everyone find you?
Hey, I'm out and about. You can find me on social media at Hey Tamra.
And of course, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And of course, you can also subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube page, BLADTCAST, where many of you are watching this right now. You'll always know when this show's going live, and we'll nail down our schedule sometime soon. Scott Moore is just a man of the world, and he is a traveling man. And Tamra, as she mentioned, just went to Portugal. I left the Valley the other day, so that shows how far I go. Yeah. I might be in Culver City sometime soon, maybe over the next week. So
the thing that Europe has right that the United States does not is the rapid testing, because I'm of course vaccinated. Everybody that I encountered on my travels were vaccinated, but we do not lean into the rapid testing the way that Europe does, which is, that's a problem.
I think that the system is flawed where, you can show a negative test within the last 72 hours. I'm like, okay, boy, a lot can happen
yesterday.
A lot can happen in 72 hours. So yeah, it's like, all right, well, if you're coming to this event, if you're coming to this concert, this sporting event, you're going to the movies, you got to get there early because you're going to have to take a test and, go wander around and, we'll text you your results. And if everything's fine, then you can come in. And if you can't, and I do wonder that, like, why isn't there more rapid testing? I guess the answer is money, because who's paying for the rapid testing? The government doesn't see the need to do it. And, Live Nation doesn't want to pay for it. The NFL certainly doesn't want to pay for it, so maybe that's just what it comes down to, is that they don't want to spend the money on it. But yeah, I mean, the 72-hour test is it's wide open. It's there's a lot of room for error. But I think that starting from a place of you want people vaccinated, and let's also check what's happened in the last hour, because you hear so much about these breakthrough infections. I've known several people that have had those, and the difference with the breakthrough infections is that it isn't as severe as the other kind, the non-breakthrough. Well, I'm sure we'll have time to talk about all of that and more next week. Stay tuned to find out when we'll be on next week. I'm not quite sure if Scott will be back. I like this mid-afternoon time. This is a good spot too, but we'll see when we can be back. So please stay in touch. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And if you subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, you'll see the show go live. You'll always be able to find the archived version. Thanks again to Tamra and to Al and to everybody who was watching live. We'll talk to you next time.